Hi everyone. Are we live? We always have this little moment where we're not sure. Says, oh, 3 seconds in. Hi everyone. So I'm coming to you a little bit later in the afternoon today. Parenting in a Pandemic 13, I think, which is a scary thought. And it's taken me a few minutes to really think about what I want to say to you today. There's always a number of things that I could be saying. And in some ways, I don't want to do the material that I often spend a number of weeks going through with parents a disservice by trying to sort of pick edited highlights, because I wouldn't do myself any favors. I wouldn't do you any favors without sort of really going through it and building layer upon layer. And I wouldn't do the material and Care for the Family, who produce a lot of what I say. I wouldn't do them any favors either. But I just want to talk today, and this is really coming from my own thoughts and my own mind, my experience as a primary school teacher a little bit, my experience working in early years a little bit, both of which I've done, my experience as a parent myself, experience as a family worker in a church. So this is sort of I'm just thinking aloud in a sense about the this sort of slightly devastating blow that we've been given by our government here in the UK, that they were going to sort of start rolling out schools, and by September there was this expectation that we were all going to be back, and life would sort of get back onto an even keel. And now we've been told that that's probably not a realistic expectation. That's not how it's going to be. And so we might be only a quarter of a third of the way into homeschooling, the homeschooling journey, when in our minds we're expecting 3 to 6 weeks. We've now had about 12 weeks, and now we've been told it could be till beyond September. It could be till Christmas, who knows. So I just wanted to sort of think about how can we keep going as parents? Where are we now? And how can we not completely give up hope or go completely mad? So I think it's worth just starting by saying we need to reframe our expectations, which sounds obvious. But we need to just think about what expectations have we got, where did we start, and where do we find ourselves now? So we need to reframe our expectations for ourselves, for our children, and basically for the whole year 2020. This is a year that we've been looking forward to since the millennium. Seems a bit of a landmark, 2020. And lots of people have had sort of business plans and vision plans that state that by 2020 we will achieve something, we will have a certain vision in place, because 2020 and vision kind of go together. And it's just completely panning out differently. So we just need to reframe our lives and our view of these things. And I think part of that is acknowledging that we started this homeschooling, this being at home, with such positivity, with such energy. But now that is kind of completely ebbed, and we are now in a place where we've run out of that sort of energy to keep going. The novelty has certainly worn off for us and our kids. We might have sort of emotions of foreboding or of negativity. And we have been feeling for a while that the current situation has not got much shape to it, but we've always had this hope that, come the summer, come September, it's going to have a real definite shape. We've got sort of shape and structure to look forward to, and that is one of the things that's been sort of swept away from under our feet. So in also acknowledging we've lost that energy and positivity we started with, we also now have a sense of grieving for, our lost future hope. And without wanting to sort of overplay it, we know that people are in real situations of grief and real situations of loss and devastation. We acknowledge that. But for ourselves, we might also have, a loss of certainty, a loss of, even the landmarks in our life we were looking forward to. The summer holidays gone. I don't know how things are going to pan out at work. The sort of certainty of the autumn and return to school has gone. Life has lost those landmarks, those sort of certainties we were looking forward to. And that means that we are experiencing an element of grief and loss. Now, so we know now that we're playing a longer game. And I just want to give a couple of warnings about social media and what we see there and how that gives us a false expectation, how we might ourselves give a false reality. But then also just to think about what are the bare essentials that I need to keep going for my children for homeschooling. And I'm going to focus on early years, foundation stage, and on primary, key stage 1 and 2. And the reasons for that is because I understand from what I hear, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that most secondary schools have quite a good system of delivering work, receiving work back that's completed, keeping tabs on children, and so on. I know there's a lot of uncertainty regarding secondary school education, but in terms of actually meeting the day-to-day education needs, there's a little bit more structure in place there. Again, I'm happy to be told that I'm wrong, but that's what I've sort of gleaned from the people that I've spoken to. And then finally, I'm just going to try and simplify for parents of preschool and primary aged children, how to just simplify looking at your role as parents in this and how you can sort of cover some things with your children. So the first thing, a word of warning about what we see on social media. Beware the super parent. Some people put all these amazing photographs of an overwhelming number of things they're doing with their children, so creative, so imaginative. Every day they're making all sorts of amazing things. They're designing things, and they all look so happy doing it. Well, I would say that they are giving us snapshots of edited highlights. And probably it's not all plain sailing in their household either. They may be doing some great things with their kids, but that's not to say that that's right for your children, and it's not to say that a super parent actually exists. And I'm sure you or I could make ourselves look like a super parent on social media just by catching our children at the right moments and writing a few lines about what they're doing in the picture. That doesn't mean to say that 23 3/4 hours of the day we're not on task. Our children aren't super children and we're not super parents. I think it's an unrealistic expectation. I do wonder for all of us whether we make ourselves look better than we really are on social media, and we catch ourselves in a loop of guilt as a result because we're not really living up to our own standards for ourselves. You know, I'm making myself look like this, but I actually know I'm not that good. So don't give yourself that guilt trip. Um, no one on social media is as good as they look. Don't give yourself the guilt trip. And don't, by looking at other people's or by actually constructing this sort of great family appearance of your own. The second thing I would say, when I was a full-time mum, which I was for quite a long time, probably 15 years or more, I found it hard to ever take time off because I worked at home, and my full-time work was looking after the home, looking after the kids, and doing all these things. And as a result of working at home, I found it almost impossible to relax and take downtime for myself. And I wonder whether people who are juggling all these things, homeschooling, work life, and home life, whether you poor guys are finding that, but even more intensely so. And it's really difficult when you get stuck in this. It's hard to stop. It's hard to take time off. You actually lose motivation to do anything as well as you should. And I empathize with that. And just in reframing your expectations, you need to perhaps note that I am struggling to keep motivated because all my work is in one location. I never get a break, and that is really doing my motivation in. So I'm going to suggest what it is that perhaps you could do with your children. This is the absolute essentials. Also, before I do that, I should say, you know, if this sort of lack of motivation because we never leave home, so we don't have time on and time off like we used to, the same is true for your children, that they don't have time on, time off like they used to have. They are stuck in the same location, and they're losing their motivation as well. I don't particularly have many answers for that, but if we just acknowledge it, and if your children are old enough to talk that through, just saying, I'm struggling with this lack of motivation because I'm here all the time, they might acknowledge that it's the same for them. Just knowing that you're going through it will help them, particularly as you have to dig deep and keep going. You're a role model for them. Remember, whatever we want our children to become, we must be that, because most values are caught as much as or more than taught. So what should we actually focus on the most? If we can't get everything done with our children that's being sent home or suggested, what are the bare minimum things that we should do? Well, the core curriculum for early years, first of all, is communication and language. It's physical development, and it's emotional and social well-being. So if you have a preschool aged child, don't worry about them reciting the alphabet too much. Don't worry about them recognizing letters too much. Don't worry about them reciting numbers in order, which we sometimes think is counting, but that is something else. So don't worry about all these math skills and language skills and literacy skills, because they are not the core curriculum in early years. I'll say what it is again: communication and learning. So being able to explain, being able to follow instructions, being able to describe, all these things are part of that. Secondly, physical development. So if your child is going up to school, things like being able to put on and off their own clothes, because they'll need to do that for PE lesson, change their own shoes, hang up their own coat, use the potty or toilet and pull up their own clothes afterwards, be able to wash and dry their own hands. These things are really important. being able to run and balance and jump, climb up ladders and stairs, put their whole foot on the floor and use the heel to toe action. All these things are more important than being able to count, believe it or not. And the third one is, what haven't I said? Emotional and social well-being. So being able to follow a lead in play, being able to give a lead in play, turn taking, showing concern for other people, showing interest in other people's lives, all these things, social well-being. If you haven't got those three, you're not going to be able to read and write and count and all the rest of it, hold a pencil or a pen. So if your child is below 60 months old, those three areas are your key areas. I'm going to come on to some other things in a minute for you, but secondly, before I go on to that, primary years. If you've got a primary age child who's still at home and is likely to be at home for a while longer, the three areas you should look at are literacy, so reading and writing, maths, and don't just get stuck on counting. There's lots of great maths, measuring, weighing, spatial awareness, all sorts of exciting and interesting things that aren't just numbers, and science. So those are the three areas. I'm sure you'll have guidance from your school. And if you're really, really struggling, if you can stick to those three areas, you'll be doing your child the most important good. But what could be more important than the key elements of your core curriculum? It's the attitude to learning that your child has. So whatever you do, if you're exploring in the forest, if you're playing with water, if you're in the sandpit, if you have one, whatever you're doing, just observe and check in with your child's attitude to whatever they're doing. I'm going to give you some pointers, and maybe you can help develop some of these in your child and help them to push these on more, because these are skills that underlie all their learning. If they have these skills and approaches to learning, then when they get back in the classroom, they're going to be able to pick things up and take things through really well. So it's things like, do they closely observe? So say they found a shell or a stone or a worm or a leaf or anything. Ask questions that make them really look intently, so that they they observe closely. Get them to say what they're seeing by asking the questions, so that it makes them want to look more closely. So that's an attitude to a characteristic of effective learning, close observation. It's also persevering, focusing and concentrating for a length of time on what interests them. Obviously, over time, we want them to have the same curiosity about things they haven't come across before. They have to start with things that interest them. Do they ask questions? Do they investigate things and turn them over? Do they have a plan, try it out, and if it doesn't go well, do they test and modify that plan and try again? So say you're trying to build a slope for your car to go down and it gets stuck on the side. Why, if it doesn't really go down fast and you want it to, what can you ask questions? Always ask questions. What can you do to make that go faster? As an adult, we want to suggest that they make a steeper slope. They prop it up on something higher. They you know, there might be bumps on the surface that they've tried. We might want to suggest a different surface, or putting something on top, or turning it over to the unbumpy side of something. Don't give them solutions, ask them questions. So all these things are really good, always by asking questions. And the other thing is commenting on, oh, I see that you're trying this. Let's see how it goes. Oh, that's a good idea. Try a different car, see if it goes faster. So comment, but don't tell them what to do. Don't give them answers. So get them to ask questions by you modeling asking questions, test their ideas, modify plans. Are they proud of their achievement for its own sake? Are they motivated to succeed? You know, just because they're proud of themselves, they're proud of their achievements, and they want to have that sense of fulfillment again. So these are all really good characteristics of effective learning. And if you can develop those in your children, whenever they get back to classroom, they're going to be motivated learners. So I don't want to go on for too much longer, but I do want to just talk about the role of parent versus the role of teacher, the home environment versus the school environment. And I want to just acknowledge, first of all, that a parent, whether you are a teacher in your professional life or not, a parent is not a teacher. A parent is a parent. A teacher is a teacher. Home is not school, and school is not home. They're both unique. They have overlapping roles in the development of our children, but they are not the same as each other. So in sort of reframing our expectations, let's acknowledge that. So imagine, so we've been doing school at home with mixed results because we're putting one thing in a completely different environment. So imagine we did it the other way around. Imagine our children had to live at school. Of course, some people do go to boarding school, but just imagine their school environment. If they had to live there, or if you had to be living there for the last 12 weeks, whatever it is, what would be missing? So we know what's missing. School, what of school is missing when we put school at home? What of home would be missing if we put home in school? Because whatever is missing, and you may want to make a list and brainstorm that is what you are giving them when they are at home. Does that make sense? So there are loads of things that they are getting at home that are unique and special to home. And that is something that they don't get at school. So you may, in reframing your expectations of yourself and the sort of ongoing home situation, you may want to really focus on what it is that home gives that is unique. So, and you may want to make a list of things that you get at home and things that you get at school. So at school, we obviously respect is important and really talked about. Order is a big thing at school. It has to be ordered, of course. But home is more chaotic by some degree because you're not dealing with 300 kids, you're dealing with 2 or 3. So in that sense, there's less regimented life. But there is not just respect, we hope there is love. Of course, there might be affection and lots of positivity at school, but at home, there is love, there is belonging, there is identity. There are elements of this at school, but much more so at home. So you may want to make a list of all the things, all the positive things at school that are unique to school, and all the positive things at home. Now, if you acknowledge that there's anything undesirable at home, say, oh, actually, we actually are getting a bit of disrespect at home now, which is a direct opposite and an undesirable. We may need to think about doing a parenting in a pandemic about dealing with negative things that arise. But you may just want to note that actually we've gone too far here and we're getting some negatives that are undesirable, and it will help you to identify those. And we know that we've talked about the difference between a parent's role and a teacher's role. We know a teacher's role is to stretch our children academically, to help them take their place in the school community, to have sort of communal values there. But it's our role as parents to help our children develop in body, mind, and spirit. Now, we know that we are all body, mind, and spirit. And we probably know that those three elements of being, human being, are interchangeable or not interchangeable. What's the word? I don't mean interchangeable. I mean related, overlapping. And if we can just simplify that we need to hit those three elements for our children. Body, we need them to obviously take care of their bodies, look after themselves. We need them to exercise. Exercise has been a big thing in lockdown, and understand the importance of that. It's very good for well-being. We know that. So it has, as we say, a spiritual element as well, if you like. Looking after our mind, so getting them to do at least their core curriculum and to develop those attitudes to effective learning, develop their mind. But there are other things that develop their mind as well. Reading stories to them will hit those curriculum targets, help them develop their vocabulary, help them to create their imagination, help them to, find ways of expressing themselves. But it's also a pleasure to do it. I always found it a pleasure anyway to read books to my children, particularly when we got to meaty chapter books. It would take us a couple of weeks to finish reading. There are lots of things we can do. Setting problems for them to solve, or setting a challenge and then only ask them questions so that they learn to solve it themselves. So that's mine. Spirit is the hardest thing. As I say, when we address one thing, we might inadvertently have a knock-on effect to spirit. But what do we mean by spiritual development? Well, we all know there's part of ourselves that feels it, this is the true me, the core me. It's made up of my values. It's made up of my temperament and my individual personality. But it's the part of me that has compassion, the part of me that, wants to make the world a better place. So perhaps finding a cause or a passion that your child has. But there's also other ways in which we find spiritual well-being. And often that's by reflecting, thinking about, so it could be thinking about, a beautiful something that you found on your walk, a beautiful flower, just putting it in the center of the table. Some people do it by lighting a candle as the daylight fades. We'll just light a candle and sit here quietly, just watch it, and then maybe you can say what's come into your mind. Music is very powerfully connected to our inner being, isn't it? And taking time to sometimes listen to music together really builds. It can calm and change an atmosphere instantly. Music, it's so good for bringing peace and tranquility. Obviously, there are things like mindfulness and meditation. All these things help. And for some people, it's maybe thinking about words that are helpful. So, in a faith scenario, we might have a Bible verse that talks about peace or love or hope. So, what are the words that you would like to focus on for your children that are going to help you to maybe take one a week and say, we're going to think about how we can be more loving? So, you're going to take love, or so we're going to think about how we can be kind to one another, how we can show caring and love to one another. You might want to do like a love hearts, hide them around the house and find them with messages on that say, I love you, or I think you're great because I love you. I love your kind heart. I love your creativity. I love, your ability at football. All sorts of things for one another to find. And how then we can show love to our neighbours. How we can raise money for a cause that we're passionate about. How we can show kindness to the environment. So there are lots of ways in which you can develop these good qualities in your children, in your home, in life, and then wider. Take one word: hope, kindness, patience. Excuse me, self-control always is a bit of a killer, but self-control is a good one. Joy, peace, there's comfort. There's lots of things that you can do to try and then build those into home life, and then build them into your response to the world. So those are just a few ideas. I've spoken more than enough, and I hope to see you again soon. Next Wednesday, there'll be another Parenting in a Pandemic. We're also going to be thinking about our Father's Day live on Father's Day from Salway Facebook page. Look out for things that we're going to do there to celebrate dads and father figures. So look out for our posts on that, and I would love to see some of your responses. But that's all for now.